In this lesson, we'll learn about the Paint Set Membership tool. The Paint Set Membership tool allows us to use Maya's artisan brush to specify what points on a deformable object, whether they be CVs or vertices, will be affected by deformers in a deformer set. So what we'll do in this lesson is work on a little project. We'll create a brow curve for this character's right brow. Then what we'll do is work with the Paint Set Membership tool to remove any influence we don't need. So to get started, selecting the face, head over to Edge Mode and start to grab a few edges around the right brow. At this point, we can go to the Move tool just to check our pivot, making sure that we have all of the edges we want selected, and also to make sure that we haven't selected any extra edges. Okay, great. So with these selected, we'll head over to Modify, Convert, Poly Edges to Curve. Go into the options, we can reset our settings. As the form, we can use Periodic, and just to keep this curve linear, we'll use the Linear Curve Degree and choose Convert. Alright, so now at this point, you'll see that the pivot is at the origin of the scene. So we'll go ahead and choose Modify Center Pivot to correct that. And now in component mode, pressing F8, we can go ahead and take this curve and kind of pull out its shape so it's easier to select. We'll also want to remove the history that this curve has by the mesh that we've converted it from. So with it selected, we can go ahead and use Delete History. I've added it to the shelf, but you can access it from Edit, Delete by Type History, and if you'd like to add it to your shelf, simply hold down Control-Shift and then choose the tool. Alright, so once the history has been removed, we can use the Wrap Deformer tool to connect this curve to our mesh. So I'll go ahead and select the mesh first, the target mesh that will be influenced by the curve. We can now shift select our curve and head over to Create Deformers, Wrap. Okay, so now at this point, if we were to select our curve and start to move it, you can see we're going to drive the entire mesh. But we only want to affect the brow. Well, here's where the Paint Set Membership tool comes into play. The mesh selected, we'll head over to Edit Deformers, and we'll find the Paint Set Membership tool right underneath the Paint Wire Weights tool. Let's go ahead and check out its options. Okay, so taking a look at this, notice we can add, transfer, or remove weight. If we use transfer, we can transfer from one set to another. Of course, add will add influence. I'm going to reset the tool so that your settings match mine, and let's go ahead and work with remove. Now at this point, we need to define what set we'd like to remove influence from. That's going to be our wrap set. So with that selected, we can now go ahead and go in and use the artisan brush to start to remove weight. You can see how our mesh starts to change color. Let's go ahead and hold down the B key and use the left mouse button to increase the radius of our brush so we can get this done a little bit faster. What I'd also recommend is going to the shading menu and turning on wireframe unshaded to keep in mind the topology and what areas we're removing influence from. So we'll just go through and grab all of these points and start to paint over them to remove the influence we don't want. As we start to get closer and closer to the influence we do want to keep, it's a good idea to decrease your brush size, just so you don't accidentally remove any weight from those points. So just about finished. We'll get in around the mouth. Start to remove some influence here. And now I'll go ahead and decrease the brush size again, just to get into the smaller area to fix up the weighting here. Okay, great. Looks like there's a few points around the mouth still to remove, so I'll just go ahead and take care of those. This one underneath the jaw, and then there's a few right around the throat and around the character's left ear. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, great. Well, at this point, once we're satisfied with what we have, if we were to, let's say, go back to our Move tool and select our curve, notice now we have a much better result than we had before. Now, the great thing is that as long as our curve has been zeroed out, which it should be automatically after creating it, once it's zeroed out in its transforms, if we were to bring this up, we can get an idea of the areas that we still need to paint. Simply select the mesh. Use the Y key to go back to our Paint Set Membership tool and start to remove any extra influence. So that's no problem at all. Let's go through and tweak a few of these spots until we're good to go. So there's a few around the base of the neck that we'll want to remove. And then for more difficult areas that the brush doesn't seem to capture, well, you could always use something like the Edit Membership tool. Just to show you that quickly, with the Edit Membership tool, what you'd want to do is basically grab the deformer, this time from, let's say, your hypergraph. So I'll go ahead and choose the hypergraph under the window menu. You select your object, view the input-output connections, grab your wrap deformer, and once that's selected from there, then you can go in and use the Edit Membership tool and start to remove any influence you don't want. So for instance, if we didn't want this point here, we can go ahead and control-click that. But if we want it back, we can shift-select that to add it back to that set. So that's basically how that works. But in this lesson, we learned how to work with the Paint Set Membership tool to add and remove influence from a deformer set.